your kids are considering college, taking the ACT test is a must. So we have an ACT, if I can even say it, crash course that doesn't require a lot of studying. Instead, the focus is on last-minute test-taking strategies that can help you boost your students' scores. College admissions coach Amanda Groh is here with me. Now, it sounds too good to be true. Taking a test, doing well on it without a whole lot of studying.
So there are some things. Now, of course, studying is important.
Yes,
right?
yes. We're not saying leave studying out, but we can lighten the load of hair.
We have about 50,000 juniors across the state taking the ACT in 1 week. 1 week from today, probably 1 week from this very moment, they are going to be taking the test. And so there are some things that if your student hasn't been very diligent in studying, that they can do to help them know more about how to approach the test, how to use their time. And so that's what I'm excited to talk about today.
And now the test has different sections within it. And so that's what you've kind of done, is broken down the different sections, how to attack those. So let's start with the English portion. What's the secret there?
Okay, so the English portion, basically they underline certain phrases and students have to choose the best wording and sometimes the best punctuation choice for these underlined parts. And students see this as a college entrance exam and they're like, well, I want to sound smart, so I'm going to add a lot of extra words. But in reality, the opposite is true. The ACT is testing you on your ability to be concise and straightforward and direct and to cut out all of the extra words. So I was just looking at a test the other day that it said the person was kneeling on their knees. For a student to be able to identify, we don't have to say on their knees if we said kneeling. That's redundant. It adds extra things. So one of the just tricks to doing well in the English section is to look for shorter answers that eliminate the extra words, that get right to the point. In fact, if you see 3 long answer choices and 1 short one, it's almost always going to be the short one. So just simplifying, understanding that is a good first step on the ACT. Perfect.
Now moving on to math. That's the one that, for a lot of people, So how do we combat the math section?
First of all, calm down. I know it's okay. Calm down.
Calming.
Okay, so math, one of the things that you should know about the math section is that it progresses in difficulty. It starts with easier questions and then they gradually turn up the heat, and the hardest questions of the test are at the end of the test. And actually for juniors, they haven't even covered all of the content that's at the end of the test. But I find that most students, they just want to finish the test. They've been trained in school that you start at the beginning and you work until the end. So the idea of running out of time is really stressful for them. So often they'll kind of trip over those easier questions at the beginning because they want to see the end. But I play this game with them called Harsh Reality Check, where I will have them guess a random letter if they made it to the end, and then I'll compare what they would have gotten if they guessed that random letter versus what they actually got by spending time in the last 10 questions of the test. And often guessing the random letter is just as good as spending time there because they're so difficult. Unless your student is a top achieving math student, high achiever on math, they really shouldn't be working in the end of the test. They should be focusing on securing those easier questions earlier in the test.
So go through what they know and then go back to the harder ones.
Yeah. Yes, so it's set up in that way anyway. Like the easier ones are at the beginning, but you've got to make sure you've secured those. Like locked those in, make sure that you solved every step before you even begin to think about doing the later ones. So there's a little bit of a switch, like after you start to notice that the questions are getting harder about the middle of the test, then your mindset needs to change from securing every single one to making judgment calls. Looking at a question and saying, I don't know how to do that. I don't recognize that. I'm going to go ahead and circle that, fill in my letter of the day, my lucky letter of the day, and just skip it. I don't want students spending energy in subjects that they aren't likely to be rewarded for. Like if there's a question topic that you just don't know how to do, identify that quickly, fill in a bubble, and move on. Don't dwell. Or don't try and come up with a logical answer because the ACT test makers have built in things that look logical but aren't right. So in order to get right, you really have to solve it.
Okay, and so moving on through this quickly, reading, that's also another difficult part of this test. Where can people or students go wrong in the reading section?
Yeah, well, there is kind of this idea out there with standardized tests that you should read the questions first, and that may be true on some standardized tests. But on the ACT, the questions really are guiding students toward getting the big picture. I recommend my students read the passage first and then attack the questions, focusing on getting the big picture. I almost like them to look at like swimming. Their faces in the water when they're reading a paragraph. Then between every paragraph break, they need to take a breath. They need to process what they just read so that by the end of the reading, they have the big picture. And then the questions will be easier. So
right.
Another thing to know about the reading section is that there are 4 passages, and they're always in the same order: prose fiction, social science, humanities, natural science. Make sure your student starts with the best one and ends with the worst based on their natural strengths and skills.
Speaking of natural science, what's the strategy here with science?
The science section of the test comes last, and that's the first battle, is most students are just exhausted and so done taking the test by the time they get there. So you've got to coach your student, give them a good pep talk to just hang in there for those last 35 minutes. It's not really about science, it's logical reasoning skills. So just interpret the information, don't overthink it. It's not about the numbers, it's about the relationship between the numbers. It's a lot more, it's logical processing, logical reasoning. So just don't let your students overthink it.
And if people are wanting more in-depth knowledge from you and understanding of the test, you guys have a great seminar coming up.
We have a huge seminar coming up. It's called College Con. It's a day for junior high and high school students and their parents to learn all things college prep. We have classes about the ACT and about earning college credit in high school, how to choose a major. Our AT&T keynote event includes Dr. Susan Madsen, a global leadership expert, Cotopaxi CEO Davis Smith, James the Mormon, the rapper, and the BYU Ballroom Dance Team. It'll be a fantastic day, and it's completely free. You can go to utahcollegecon.com to reserve your free tickets.
Wonderful. A lot of information, people to learn from. Thank you so much for joining us.